Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that changed my life many years ago. Before you can ever hope to lead a business, or a team, or a family, or a dream, you must first learn how to lead yourself. Now that may sound simple, almost too simple, but it is one of the most neglected truths in the modern world. Most people don't fail because of the economy, or the government, or the competition. No, my friends, they fail because they never learn to manage the person they see in the mirror every morning. The greatest battle is not out there in the marketplace. The greatest battle is inside, between the part of you that wants to grow and the part that wants to stay comfortable. And comfort, oh my, comfort is a sneaky enemy. It whispers to you. It says, take it easy. It says, tomorrow is just as good as today. It says, you can improve later. And if you're not careful, you start believing that voice. You start walking with it, talking with it, living with it, and before long, you start losing opportunities you didn't even know you had. Now, some people call that laziness. I don't call it laziness. I call it the absence of self-leadership. Because when there's no leader inside, comfort becomes the captain. Distraction becomes the director. Fear becomes the manager. And your life, instead of being something you build, becomes something you react to. But here's the good news, and it is good news. The moment you decide to lead yourself, everything begins to change. Not in a flash, not in a miracle, but in a quiet shift deep inside. A new sense of responsibility, a new sense of direction, a new sense of dignity. I learned early in my life that if I wanted my circumstances to improve, I had to improve. If I wanted my world to change, I had to change. If I wanted doors to open, I had to become the kind of person those doors would open for. That's self-leadership. That's the foundation. And today, in this lesson, I want to take you through 7 rules, 7 powerful principles that will help you transform from the version of yourself that hesitates, delays, procrastinates, and excuses into the version that acts, decides, commits, and leads. These rules are not complicated, but they are demanding. They ask for honesty. They ask for discipline. They ask for responsibility. But if you take them seriously, I promise you, they will change the entire direction of your life. So for the next little while, I want you to stay with me, not just with your ears, but with your ambition. Because if you'll let these ideas in, you may walk out of here as a different person than the one who walked in. Not a perfect leader, but a beginning leader. And that beginning is where all great changes start. Now, let's begin with rule number 1. Now, my friends, let's begin with the first rule of self-leadership, and it's a big one. In fact, it may be the biggest. Take full responsibility for your life, or surrender full control of it. There is no middle ground. Responsibility is the gateway, the doorway, the entrance to every improvement you will ever make. The moment we blame, we hand our future to someone else. And the day you hand away responsibility, you also hand away power, the power to change, the power to grow, the power to lead yourself into a better life. I learned something early in my journey. I was a young man complaining about everything, the weather, the economy, my bills, my boss, my luck. And then one day, someone wiser than me said, Jim, the problem isn't the world. The problem is you don't have a plan. You don't have discipline. You don't have direction. I didn't like hearing that, but I needed it because that was the day I discovered the truth. You can't change the seasons, but you can change yourself. The moment I accepted responsibility, everything began to shift. Not overnight, but the direction of my life began to turn. You see, lazy people, and remember, we're not talking about laziness as an identity, but as a condition. Lazy people live in blame. They blame circumstances. They blame parents. They blame traffic. They blame the past. They blame the future. And after a while, they start to believe the story they've been telling. But leaders live in ownership. Leaders say, if it's to be, it's up to me. They don't wait for the right time. They create the right time. They don't wait for motivation. They build discipline. They don't wait for opportunity. They prepare for it. Responsibility gives them strength. Blame steals it. Now here's a phrase worth writing down. Responsibility is not about fault, it's about control. Life is not asking you to blame yourself for every problem. Life is asking you to take control of what you do next. You may not be responsible for where you started, but you are responsible for where you go from here. And if you want to lead yourself, the first assignment is simple. Claim your life as your own. Let me give you a little exercise. I call it the 72-hour responsibility reset. For the next 3 days, write down every area of your life where you've been blaming something or someone. Be honest. Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's your energy. Maybe it's your finances. Maybe it's your health. And next to each one, replace the blame with one sentence. I am now responsible for improving this. You'll feel the power shift immediately. Responsibility is the beginning of transformation. Because the truth is, you cannot lead a person you refuse to take responsibility for. And that includes you. So take charge. Claim your direction. Take ownership of your decisions. And once you step fully into responsibility, you'll discover something extraordinary. You suddenly have the power to shape the life you want. Now, once responsibility is in place, something else becomes possible. And that brings us to the second rule of self-leadership. Now that we've laid the foundation with responsibility, let's move to the second rule of self-leadership, and this one reaches deep into your character. It's simple, but it's powerful. Keep the promises you make to yourself, or your self-respect begins to disappear, and once self-respect goes, leadership goes with it. Because you cannot follow a person you don't trust, even if that person is you. You see, my friends, most people think they struggle with discipline. They think they struggle with motivation, but the real struggle, the deeper struggle, is that they've broken so many promises to themselves that their mind no longer believes their own words. They say, I'll start tomorrow, and tomorrow comes and nothing happens. They say, I'll wake up early, and then they don't. They say this time will be different, and then it isn't. And each time that happens, something small but important breaks inside, not loudly, quietly, quiet enough that you can pretend it didn't matter. But over time, those little breaks add up, and you wake up one day wondering why you can't trust yourself to follow through. Now, here's a lesson I learned that changed me forever. Discipline begins with honesty. If you can't keep big promises, make smaller ones. In fact, make promises so small that you can't break them. 5 minutes of reading, 5 minutes of walking, 5 minutes of learning. You see, it isn't the size of the promise that builds self-respect, it's the consistency of keeping it. Once your mind sees that you mean what you say, it will follow you anywhere. But if it learns that your words are cheap, your mind will become rebellious, doubtful, resistant, and that resistance shows up in every decision you make. Let me put it this way. Every promise you keep builds your character. Every promise you break erodes it. Character is not built in giant leaps. It's built in small, silent acts of loyalty to yourself. And when you honor your own word, something wonderful happens. You begin to trust yourself again. And trust is the soil where consistency grows. Without trust, you don't have habits. You have hopeful intentions. And hopeful intentions don't create leaders. You want to know how I learned this? I made big promises for years that I couldn't keep. Next year will be my year. Next week I'll change. Tomorrow I'll start. And nothing happened because nothing changed in my habits. Then a mentor told me, Jim, don't promise the mountain. Promise the walk. And that's when everything shifted. I started with tiny commitments. I kept them. And slowly, I rebuilt the bridge between intention and action. That bridge is called self-respect. So here's my challenge to you. For the next 7 days, keep every promise you make to yourself, no matter how small. If you say you'll read for 10 minutes, do it. If you say you'll drink a glass of water first thing in the morning, do it. If you say you'll clean your desk for 5 minutes, do it. Not because the action is big, but because you said it. And that alone makes it important. Remember this, my friends. The first follower of every leader is the leader himself. Lead yourself with integrity, and you'll gain a kind of inner strength that cannot be bought, borrowed, or faked. Break your word to yourself, and leadership becomes impossible. Keep your word, and leadership becomes inevitable. Now, Once we begin keeping the promises we make to ourselves, something remarkable starts to happen. We begin to design a life that supports leadership instead of resisting it. And that brings us to rule number 3. Now that we've talked about responsibility and the promises you make to yourself, let's move to rule number 3, and this one may surprise you. If you don't design your environment will design you. And believe me, it will not design you for greatness. It will design you for comfort, distraction, and the slow erosion of your potential. You see, my friends, people often think laziness is a personality trait. But more often than not, laziness is simply a reaction to an environment that works against you. It's not that a person is unwilling, it's that their surroundings are constantly pulling them toward ease instead of effort. You can't lead yourself if your environment is leading you somewhere else. Let me explain. Jim Rohn used to say, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, but it goes further than that. You are also the average of the 5 rooms you sit in, the 5 apps you use, the 5 habits your friends normalize, the 5 distractions within reach. Your environment speaks to you all day long. The question is, what is it saying? If your desk is cluttered, if your phone is noisy, if your friends are unambitious, if your room is unorganized, if your habits are scattered, you're fighting a battle before the day even begins. Because your surroundings are shaping your decisions long before discipline ever gets a chance. That's why one of the greatest acts of self-leadership is to take control of the world around you. Not perfectly, just intentionally. Now, let me give you something practical. I call it the environment test. Ask yourself 3 questions about any room you spend time in. Does this space pull me toward my goals? Does it push me toward distraction? Does it reflect the kind of person I want to become? If the answer to the first question is no, and the second is yes, then you have a leadership problem, not a laziness problem. Because your environment will always win unless you redesign it. So how do we redesign it? Start with the simple things. If you want to read more, put books where your eyes can see them. If you want to exercise more, set your clothes out the night before. If you want to write more, clear your desk. If you want to think better, declutter your space. If you want fewer distractions, remove the things that interrupt you. And here's a classic principle. Make the good habits easier and the bad habits harder. If you want to stop snacking, don't put the snacks within reach. If you want to stop scrolling, don't sleep with your phone next to your bed. If you want better sleep, don't turn your room into an entertainment center. Believe me, leadership becomes much simpler when your environment supports your intentions. I call this the 10-minute leadership reset. Spend 10 minutes at the end of each day preparing tomorrow's environment so that tomorrow's version of you has no excuses. Lay out your tools, set your workspace, organize your priorities. When your environment is ready, your mind becomes ready. And when your mind is ready, leadership becomes a natural response instead of a forced behavior. Remember this, discipline is easier when your environment does half the work. Lazy people blame their surroundings. Leaders shape them. So ask yourself today, is my environment helping me rise or pulling me down? And if the answer isn't what you want, then change it because you can. And once your environment begins supporting you, consistency suddenly becomes much more achievable. Now, once you've taken responsibility, kept your promises, and shaped your environment, the next step is crucial. You must not rely on emotion to run your day. You must rely on something far stronger. That leads us to rule number 4. Now let's move to rule number 4. A rule that separates the amateurs from the achievers and the dreamers from the doers. If you don't schedule your values, your feelings will end up running your day. And let me tell you, feelings can be wonderful, but they are also unreliable. They change with the weather, they shift with your mood, they fluctuate with your energy, and if you depend on how you feel to decide what you'll do, you will never build the life you want. Jim Rohn used to say, either you run the day or the day runs you. But here's the truth behind that statement. You run the day by scheduling your values. Without a schedule, even the best intentions disappear into distraction. And distraction is the silent killer of potential. Let's talk honestly. You've had days where you said you'd read, days where you said you'd exercise, days where you said you'd work on your dream, but the day passed, not because you're weak, but because it wasn't scheduled, it wasn't protected, it wasn't given a place in time, and what is not placed in time rarely becomes real. You see, lazy people live by emotion. Leaders live by structure. Lazy people say, I'll do it when I feel like it. Leaders say, I'll do it because it's on the calendar. Lazy people ask, am I in the mood? Leaders ask, is it on the agenda? It sounds simple, but it changes everything. Let me give you something practical. The 3-block day. If you want to lead yourself well, divide your day into 3 clear blocks. Morning growth block, something that builds you. Reading, learning, planning, quiet reflection. Work performance block, something that builds your results. Deep work, important tasks, skill development, progress toward goals. Evening development block, something that builds your character. Reviewing your day, journaling, stretching, preparing tomorrow's environment. Just imagine for a moment if you devoted a little time every morning to your mind, a little time every day to your work, and a little time every evening to your character, where would you be in 30 days? In 6 months? In 3 years? The difference would be extraordinary. Now here's the key. You don't need long hours, you need scheduled hours. A poorly scheduled day wastes more energy than a busy one. And a day led by feelings will almost always drift toward comfort instead of growth. Let me give you a very important phrase. People don't fail because of lack of time. They fail because of lack of intention. Time is never the issue. Intention is the issue. You make time for what you value. And if you don't schedule it, it means your values are ideas, not priorities. So here's my challenge. Choose 3 values, perhaps health, learning, and productivity, and put them on your calendar for the next 7 days. Not vaguely, precisely, with a start time and end time. Then honor them the way you would honor an appointment with someone you respect. Because when you schedule your values, you begin treating yourself with dignity. And when you treat yourself with dignity, leadership becomes much easier. Now, once your values are scheduled, something very special becomes possible. You begin ending each day not in regret, but in improvement. Not in chaos, but in clarity. And that brings us to rule number 5, a rule that transforms average days into extraordinary ones. Now let's move to rule number 5. One of my personal favorites and one of the most transformative concepts you will ever learn. Never go to bed without becoming just a little better than you were when you woke up. Even if it's only by 1%. Even if it's only one tiny act of growth, always end the day wiser, stronger, or more prepared than you began. My friends, this rule is simple, but it is the difference between a life that moves forward and a life that quietly falls behind. Because here's the truth, improvement is not an event, it's a daily decision. Success is not created in one moment. It's created in small, invisible moments, the ones nobody sees, nobody praises, nobody celebrates. But those small improvements, stacked day after day, become a force that no setback can stop. Jim Rohn said it best, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Why? Because you take you everywhere you go. You take your thinking everywhere you go. You take your habits everywhere you go. And if you become better, everything around you becomes better too. Your relationships, your opportunities, your decisions, even your income. Let's talk about how this works. Most people end their day in one of 2 ways. Either in consumption, scrolling, watching, distracting, or in regret. I wish I had done more. But leaders close the day in reflection. Leaders ask themselves the right questions. Leaders finish their day with intention. So let me give you a simple practice. I taught many students over the years. I call it the evening audit. It takes only 5 minutes, but it can change your life. Before you go to bed, ask yourself 4 questions. What did I learn today? Even one idea is progress. Even one line from a book counts. What did I improve today? Maybe you made a better decision, handled a situation more calmly, or practiced a skill. What did I avoid today that I should have faced? This builds honesty, the foundation of discipline. What must I do tomorrow to stay on track? This builds direction, the foundation of leadership. 5 minutes. That's all it takes. No guilt, no judgment, just truth. Truth, gently examined at the end of each day, becomes wisdom at the end of each month. And here's the magic. If you ask these questions every night, you will naturally become better every day. Because the human mind cannot ignore a question it sees daily. It seeks answers. It searches for improvement. It looks for growth automatically. Let me give you one more simple rule for this section. Learn 10 pages, write 10 lines, or practice for 10 minutes every day. That's it. Tiny, repeatable, dependable. You don't need heroic effort. You need daily effort. Lazy people wait for the perfect day. Leaders improve on the imperfect ones. Lazy people chase inspiration. Leaders create momentum. Lazy people drift. Leaders decide. So remember, never go to bed the same person you were when you woke up. Leave each day a little wiser, a little sharper, a little stronger. Because with enough days like that, your entire life begins to transform. Now, once you are improving daily, another powerful truth becomes clear. You can't grow alone. Who you spend time with will either nourish your growth or quietly sabotage it. And that brings us to rule number 6. Now let's move to rule number 6. And this one can change your life faster than almost anything else. Choose your circle wisely because standards are contagious. You don't just pick up the habits of the people around you. You pick up their expectations, their energy, their ambition, their excuses, their courage, and yes, even their laziness. Jim Rohn said it for decades. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But let me add something to that. You're also the average of the conversations you hear, the attitudes you absorb, the behaviors you normalize, and the standards you allow. Your circle is not just who you spend time with, it's who you become because of who you spend time with. Now, my friends, listen carefully. There are 3 types of people in your life. 1, the pullers. These people pull you backward. They drain your energy. They dismiss your dreams. They invite you to stay average. They tell you it's okay to quit, okay to slack off, okay to stay the same. And if you're not careful, their voice becomes your inner voice. 2, the passengers. These people keep you stuck. They're not negative, but they're not growing either. They're comfortable. They're predictable. They don't challenge you, push you, or inspire you. They make it easy to stay exactly where you are. 3, the pushers. These people lift you higher. They expect more from themselves, and because of that, they expect more from you. They're disciplined. They're moving forward. They're hungry. They're learning. They're improving. And simply being in their presence raises your standards. Now, let me tell you something important. Self-leadership grows best in high-standard soil. If you put a strong seed in weak soil, it struggles. If you put an average seed in strong soil, it thrives. The environment matters, and so do the people in it. Lazy people surround themselves with comfort-driven people. Leaders surround themselves with standard-driven people. And the simplest sign of a great circle is this. Being around them makes excuses feel uncomfortable. Let me give you something practical. I call it the friendship inventory. Take 5 minutes and write down the names of the people you spend the most time with. Then ask, does this person inspire me or drain me? Do they challenge me or enable me? Do they make me want to improve or relax? Do they talk about growth or gossip? Are they builders or complainers? It's not about judging people. It's about guiding your life. And sometimes, in order to grow, you must create a little distance, not from people you dislike, but from people who quietly hold you back. And sometimes, you must move closer to someone who stretches you, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Growth is rarely comfortable, but it's always worth it. Here's something I've learned. If you walk with confident people, you become confident. If you walk with disciplined people, you become disciplined. If you walk with ambitious people, you become ambitious. Standards spread through proximity, so choose wisely. Because self-leadership becomes 10 times easier when your circle lives by the same values you're trying to build. Now, once your environment is strong, your values are scheduled, and your circle is lifting you, something powerful happens. Your emotions begin to hold less control over your choices. And that leads us to rule number 7, the rule that separates temporary improvement from unstoppable growth. Now, my friends, let's move to rule number 7, the final rule of self-leadership, and perhaps the most revealing one of all. Lead yourself through hard days, because that's where real leaders are made. Anyone can perform on a good day. Anyone can take action when they're inspired, energized, motivated, excited. But the true test of self-leadership is what you do when the feelings are gone, when the energy is low, when the mood is off, when the day is heavy, and the path feels difficult. You see, lazy days don't destroy your life, it's giving in to them that does. And leaders are not people who never feel lazy. Leaders are people who have learned how to lead themselves in spite of laziness. They don't wait for the mood. They don't wait for the spark. They don't wait for the perfect moment. They act based on values, not emotions. Jim Rohn used to say, don't let your emotions control you. Learn to control your emotions, and that's the secret. The lazy person asks, do I feel like it? The leader asks, did I decide it? And there's a world of difference between those two questions. Let me give you 3 simple truths about hard days. 1, hard days are not a sign you're failing, they're a sign you're human. Everyone has them, even the great ones, even the disciplined ones, even the leaders you admire. The difference is not the presence of difficulty. The difference is the response to difficulty. 2, hard days build strength you can't get anywhere else. Just like muscles grow from resistance, character grows from adversity. You can't become mentally strong if everything is easy. Ease never built a backbone. Challenge did. 3, hard days are where identity is forged. What you do when no one is clapping, no one is watching, and no one is praising, that is who you truly are. And that is where self-respect grows. But here's the good news. You don't need to be perfect on a hard day. You simply need to show up, even in the smallest way. That's why I teach something I call the hard day protocol, a simple plan to keep you moving when everything in you wants to stop. The hard day protocol: do the smallest possible version of your commitment. Don't do the full workout, take a 10-minute walk. Don't read 30 pages, read 2. Don't write a chapter, write a paragraph. Don't meditate for 20 minutes, meditate for 3. Do it immediately. Don't negotiate, don't debate, don't bargain. The longer you think, the weaker you become. Action interrupts emotion. Do it without drama. Don't complain your way through it. Don't turn it into a big story. Just do the small action quietly, calmly, consistently. Celebrate the victory, because even a small victory on a hard day builds enormous confidence. And confidence is fuel for the next day. Here's something important to remember. Consistency is not about perfection. It's about never fully stopping. The lazy person stops at the first sign of discomfort. The leader reduces the load but keeps the rhythm. And that is what makes them unstoppable. So write this down, my friends. A leader acts. A follower waits. A lazy person delays. Your future will be shaped by which one of those you choose to be on the days that test you the most. And once you learn to lead yourself through the difficult days, once you develop the ability to move forward, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unappealing, you become someone who can trust themselves in any circumstance. And that's when the world begins to trust you too. Now that we've explored all 7 rules, it's time to bring this lesson home, to tie everything together and leave you with the final message of self-leadership. Now, my friends, as we come to the close of this lesson, let me bring it all together. We've covered a lot of ground today, 7 rules that can take you from the version of yourself that hesitates to the version that leads. Not the version that waits, but the version that decides. Not the version that reacts, but the version that takes responsibility for every step forward. And if there's one message I want you to remember, it's this. From this day on, lead yourself first. Before you attempt to lead a team, a business, a family, or a community, begin with you. Because the most important person you will ever manage is the one you bring to every situation. Your character, your discipline, your mindset, your philosophy. Let's briefly revisit what we learned. Rule 1, take full responsibility or lose full control. Your life won't change until you claim it. Rule 2, keep promises to yourself. Your self-respect is built on the agreements you keep with you. Rule 3, design your environment. If your surroundings don't support your goals, they will sabotage them. Rule 4, schedule your values. Don't wait for feelings. Build structure around what matters most. Rule 5, never go to bed without becoming better than you woke up. Small daily improvements create massive long-term transformation. Rule 6, choose your circle wisely. Standards rise or fall based on the company you keep. Rule 7, lead yourself through hard days. That's where character is built, discipline is strengthened, and leaders are born. These are not theories. These are principles. And principles don't care about your mood. They don't depend on your motivation. They don't shift with circumstances. Principles remain true whether you acknowledge them or not. But if you do acknowledge them, and if you live them, they will elevate your life beyond what you thought possible. You see, success is not something you chase. Success is something you attract by the person you become. And self-leadership is the process of becoming that person day by day, decision by decision. And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to be extraordinary to begin. You just have to begin. Begin with honesty. Begin with one small promise. Begin with one room cleaned, one schedule set, one day improved, one hard moment conquered. Begin where you are with what you have, and let consistency do the rest. Because leadership is not a title, it's a standard. It's what you expect from yourself when no one is watching. It's the quiet courage to say, I will not live beneath my potential. It's the daily choice to show up, even in the smallest possible way. So from this day on, lead yourself first. Lead yourself with responsibility. Lead yourself with structure. Lead yourself with discipline. Lead yourself with intention. And watch how success begins to follow you. Not because you wished for it, but because you walked in the direction of it. My friends, I hope today's lesson has given you something valuable, something you can use, something you can apply, something that will help you shape the next chapter of your life. And remember, when you learn to lead yourself, you unlock the power to lead anything. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention. And more than anything, thank you for your commitment to becoming the next best version of you.